Erik, the floor is yours. Okay, good morning everybody. My name is Erik Siegel from the Netherlands, and I'm going to talk a little bit about software management in eXist. And the reason I'm doing this talk about software management is that I'm actually fairly new to the eXist community, about half a year, so maybe I'm talking nonsense, but I hope not. And when I started working for eXist, working with eXist and programming in eXist, I found out that actually doing software management as I was used to became quite difficult. So I tried some tricks and fiddled around and hope I came up with an elegant solution that I would like to share with you. So what's the problem? Let me ask you a few questions first. Who's actually doing software development in eXist, building systems here in the... Okay, quite a few. And which of you is doing version control, software version control over all this software? Less. Okay, and another thing is who has to manage deployment, which I mean is bringing your software to other servers. Okay, the eXist-db team, of course. Yeah. Well, that's my problem. That was exactly the problem I ran into when I started with eXist. You do software development in eXist, and you have to work in the database. You can work on disk, but you get, when you do that, you'll find out that you get a lot less. Your database just doesn't work the same when you do software on disk and when you do software in the database. Which makes for difficult version management because you need files on disk. And version management has actually a quite strong relationship with deployments. So let's talk a little bit about that. Just a little introduction to myself. I'm a veteran, bit of a veteran in the IT world. I started programming in 1978, which was before internet, and even before XML, if you can believe it. I work in several areas. I give trainings. I do all kinds of XML stuff. And my customers are in educational world, educational publishers and other publishers. And the main reason for this talk is the last bullet on the slide. I do also still, besides consultancy, write XML applications for customers, and then you run into all kinds of problems, like version management and deployments. Okay, let's first define a little bit what we're talking about. What do I mean with version management? Well, in the upper left-hand corner you have a programmer puzzling around creating its software, which usually takes its form in files on disk in some kind of directory structure on your disk. And if you have your files on disk, you can easily synchronize them with a version control system like Subversion or JIT or whatever you want to use. However, when you do it in eXist-db, things are a bit different. You develop in a database, so you have no longer files on disk. Which gives you problems doing normal version controls. I tried to use the WebDAV interface and do version control through the WebDAV interface, but I'm not sure if it's... Besides that, when you create a module in eXist, you create your xquery and other files, I also usually have files outside the database. I have documentation, I have shell scripts, I have IDE configuration files, for instance my Oxygen project files, which all live outside my database, but which are actually part of the same module, the same component, and I would like to handle them as one thing and not as two separate parts. So here we have the situation. We have an eXist-db database, and we have some files, a structure in there with collections and resources. We have files on disk which are actually all together part of the same software module, and we would like to synchronize them with a version management system, whichever you want to use. So, and that is not really easy, as I found out, so we have a bit of a situation there. How do we do that? And I would like to present a solution to that. The second thing is deployments, which is usually also a problem, because we have Joe the programmer working around on his development system, and now his boss says, please Joe, bring your software to the test server. So Joe brings his software to the test server, and starts it up running. Oh, now we have to bring the same software to the acceptance server, so the customer can accept the software. And if that's all right, and the software works out fine, of course you have your production server to bring your software to, this is a fairly normal thing to do when you're doing software development. And every time you do a deployment, you have to do a lot of things. You have to track which version you deploy, so you can do it again, or you can do the same deployment to your acceptance and your production server. You have to move files, usually a lot of them. You have to update the database when you do eXist. You have to sometimes hand edit files, run scripts, whatever. Lots and lots of very small things which you're not allowed to forget one, because then it won't work. And I'm not sure how you feel about these kinds of jobs, but this is how I feel about it. It's actually very boring. So I'm not quite fond of them. And we have yet another situation, because we have to remember, when we have to do a deploy, we have to remember lots of very small things and lots of details you have to attend to. And even if you think you've done it right, something keeps nagging on you. I forgot this little file, this little configuration thing, this little security setting. Did I put in the RAID ACLs, which I haven't just pointed out? Whatever. You always forget something. It's terrible. Okay. So one more thing. Maybe some of you might wonder what the relation is between version control and deployments. Well, if you do it by the book, then you do your deployment through or from your version control system, so you can actually track exactly which version you deploy. So there is a very strong relationship. If you have good version management, then you can also do good deployments. Okay, and the solution, of course, for this is automation. I mean, you have to automate as much as possible so you can't forget things. And that actually writing these automation is fun, so at least I think it's fun. So that at least it makes it a lot more fun to do these things. So I wrote a few scripts to do this, and I'll tell you about it. Okay, there are three components to this. The first thing is, how can I do my automated code extraction from the database? So I have my database with my collections and resources in it, and I want to extract it so I can do version management on them. Second thing is, I have to do a deploy, so I have to know what to deploy, and I have to gather and to administrate what I'm going to deploy and to assign it a build number or a build name. And third thing, of course, when I've done that, I have to actually deploy it to the server. So here's how I do it. The first thing is automatic code extraction from the database. And my goal is, I want to use a standard version control system in a standard way. So personally, I use Subversion. I have hired a server somewhere in the cloud which runs Subversion for me. So to do that, I need files on disk. And I want it to be easy. I want to do easy backups, easy restores. For instance, when there is a new version of eXist, I want to easily put my modules back in. I want to transfer, move, and migrate my code easily. And the third thing is I want no barrier for using it. It must be easy and user-friendly. It should be Apple-like. You know, just click something and it should work. Because then you do it often.
You have to hand over a lot of money first.
Well, this is all open source. Okay. As soon as it's easy, you'll do it often. You have no barriers for using it. Okay. So here's how it works. We have an eXist-database. And in my eXist-database, I have my project. Let's say it's called project is /db/project X, and below project X there are of course lots of other collections and resources and whatever. And on disk I have I have the rest of the project X files, which for instance the Word files or the other documentations or scripts or whatever, all belonging to project X. However, in my database there are also other modules like resides, the eXist-db, which is something I don't want to extract because that's not useful for me. Okay, then we have our little software robot which starts working. And what does it do? The first thing it does, it checks all the collections underneath /db for a special file. In my case it's called xdb extract.xconf, but you can call it any way you want. My software robot just checks the collections for collections which have this file in them, and if it finds this file it says, this is a collection I will need to extract. And what it does, it creates a directory underneath project called eXist-db and extracts the whole collection to the file system in backup style. I'm not sure if you're aware what the difference is. You can extract it extract style, which just extracts your collections and resources as files. And if you do it backup style, it does that also. It also adds, I think, config file, something which holds the metadata and the user group settings for your project. So if you do it backup style, you can easily do it. You can easily do a restore, including all your settings. And as Adam told us, also for the new security system that will work. Let's hope so. Okay, he's nodding. So you do that. And so now you have all your files on disk under your project X directory on disk, and you can do an easy commit with your version control system. So now things are becoming easy. So how did I implement that? Well, I think the end script is a logical thing to look at. I used end, and I used end concrypt, which is an extension to end, with which you can do if statements and loops. And of course the exist extensions for end. And this is just a little fragment. I will not go into detail about it. If you want the code, on the last slide is my email address. Just send me a mail, I'll give you the code, no problem. This is a little code fragment which checks for the special file to be there and then starts extracting the files. And is it easy? Yes, it's just a one script which runs over your database, checks for these special files, and extracts all your projects which need to be extracted to your file system. I have an icon on my desktop which I can click, and I have integrated it in my IDE, and for me that's Oxygen. I just created a button on the toolbar which I click before I stop working, and things run. So no barrier. Second component of the system is what do I have to deploy? You usually have not only your project X you want to deploy to a server, but in my case I have the tendency to create a software library, so you also have to deploy one or more software libraries included with your project to your server. So it's not just one project, it's more, and you need to know which ones to deploy. If you do that, you want to freeze the state, you want to freeze the version of your models. Which version of your model are you going to deploy? And you have to register some kind of build name or build number for your deployment. So what you actually deploy is a build, and a build consists of one or more modules in specific versions. So how does it work for me? Here we have our subversion repository, in which I committed my project. So we have the As project is underneath, we have the eXist-db directory where all the eXist-db content is. And I have a library also, which is doing the same trick. And then in my subversion I created a special directory called builds, but you can call it anything you like, in which I create builds. So this is the starting point. Now my little software robot starts working, and what does it do? It asks me, okay, what's your build name? And then it creates a directory underneath _builds with this name. Because I'm going to deploy Project X today. Then it copies the current version of all the modules which I want to deploy to this directory. And you might wonder whether that it's an expensive operation because you copy software and there can be a lot of files in them, but it's not. Within Subversion, if you copy a version, the only thing you copy are pointers. So it's very easy, it's quick, and it doesn't cost you a lot of disk space or memory. So now we have we have a specific build name, and under this build name we have gathered all components we need in the deploy. Implementation is getting boring. An end script again. The only thing different from the previous one is this one is application dependent, because every application of course has its own list of modules which needs to be deployed. But the difference are just, well, the differences are not very big. You can just copy the script from one project to the other and make a few tweaks and then it works again. And the code fragment here shows how you call subversion from end. Okay? Now the last step in this, of course, now we have a build and now we want to deploy it on the server. Again, there are a few goals. Well, the first thing is, of course, no errors, no forgetting. So just give a command, let it run, let's do it. And it should be easy and it should be fast. And there are two reasons for that. The first thing is you don't want to have any barriers in deploying small updates. You notice you have deployed it on an acceptance server and the customer says, oh, there's a little bug in there. You say, yes, it's a bug. You can change the bug. And then the tendency is to patch your configuration on the acceptance server, but well, then you again have the chance that you forget things. So it should be just press of a button and your deploy should run. So you can easily also deploy small updates. And the second reason is you have less downtime. So when you deploy to a production server and you automate it, then it's just a script that runs and which actually does it all, and the downtime is minimized. So how does this work? Here we have our subversion repository with our build directory in it, and we have a big server somewhere in the cloud which also runs an eXist-db database. Now what I do is my little software robot in this case runs on the server. And what it actually does, the first thing it does, it asks you, okay, which build do you want to deploy, and it extracts this build to the server disk. So it extracts all the files to the server disk. After that, it runs import statements to import the modules which should be imported into the eXist-database. And the third thing it does, it writes a little config.xml file which registers the version, the date, the build name, all these kinds of administrative stuff. And after that imports this into my project. And this gives me the opportunity to do things like on info pages, show me the right build number, automatically show the right build number, the right build date, etc. So you cannot make errors with that. So that's it. This is actually what the script does. Implementation is an end script. Again, it's also not generic, it's application dependent. And what I now do is only this, but you can of course add other scripts if you want to run things or do other stuff within the script, whatever you want to do, just to make sure that your deployment is absolutely complete. And the little end fragment you see here is how you write this little configuration file, XML configuration file to this and store it in the eXist database. Okay. So, you can wake up again. Any questions to know? Yeah.
I'm using version management also for the comparisons between versions. So what did I change since previous version?
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible too? Because you tell me you're dumping the files in the backup format, including that metadata.
Yeah.
So doesn't that affect the number of differences that you see? I'm just curious.
You know, when you do an extract in the backup style, you get the files as you have them in your database, but it adds extra files with a special name, which is metadata.
Okay.
So your files you hand edited are just your files with the
Okay, so change tracking is still easy.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. No problem. Okay, just let's go over it quickly again. We have the normal situation where we have files in disk and do version management, and from our version management do deployments to various servers. It's boring. So the solution is just make a script which extracts the project you want to extract automatically in one go to your to the server disk, or to your development system disk, and make it easy. Create a button or an icon or whatever to do it. From that you create a build in which you gather all your components in your version management system underneath the build name. And after that you do a third script which you run on your server, which extracts the build from your version control system and imports it into the database. So with these three little scripts, they are really small, I think all three are less than 100 lines of code or something. We have an integrated solution, and I found it really, it helped me a lot to do my software management and my deployments better. So that's all. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to give this talk. If you want to code, or you want any other information about this, just send me a mail and I'll be happy to send you the code and answer questions about it. And if you have any other questions, I would be happy to answer them.
If you want to revert one resource back to the database, then you revert the whole collection, or you can run the script to push it back to the database.
I would personally do a manual thing, just revert to one. Yeah, because these are the things which happen not so very often. So that's a special. And you can automate, what I've done here is automate the bulk of the work. And all these special things like reverting a single file or that kind of thing, I would say just do it manually. Okay. Yeah.
The implementation parts.
Yeah.
Just thinking out loud, really.
Yeah.
If you were to use the eXML package format for your project, should that then be less implementation dependent but more eXML project format dependent?
Please could you repeat the question? Yeah, the question of Adam was if we could use the XPath format, is that the right one?
Yeah, so if you laid your projects in eXist-db out using the eXML package format, would some of the implementation specific parts go away if you sort of standardize more of them?
If we would use the XPath format, would some of the dependent parts go away? I don't know, because I haven't looked into that. Okay, that's a good idea. Yeah.
But it would just for the module, the code part for Explorate, but not for, it doesn't support yet data,
Okay.
like XML files.
Yeah, within eXist-db.
Sorry?
Within eXist-db. So we have extended it.
Alright.
So as with everything, there are more than one way to go, more than one way to do it.
I mean, there is
Although
a way
this is not a Perl conference.
so there is a way to use it, but you have to.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's actually quite easy for all those packages. If you look at the newer version, we have moved all demo code into the eXpath packages as well, and you can install them with one click. And what Exist does is, well, it uses the ordinary eXpath descriptor. I'll set up a certain user before I start to install and things like that. So you can automate quite a bit with it. but I think I'm going to demonstrate that.
Okay.
But we don't
More
do
about
this, we don't do version control. I
Okay.
have a huge problem with version control. So I do want that code.
That email. Okay, one question there.
Well, you decided to distribute the knowledge of what components are in the app
Yeah.
down to each of the collections. Doesn't, rather than have a central manifest of,
Yeah.
doesn't that give you problems with being able to do different builds or manage that manifest?
I haven't run into that situation.
Right.
So maybe my builds and my deployments are too simple for that. It could be. I don't know. So, but it's those are the things which I usually say, "Oh, I'll solve it when I come to it." I haven't just run into the problem.
Right.
But any more questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
That's probably something cool. I'm just kidding.